and we're continuing with Exodus. Now, let me show you here. Let's stop for just a minute and pause in our movement of Exodus. All right? The word Exodus, okay, obviously you know what that is, to leave. The point that I wanted to make with you is that the book of Exodus has nothing to do with people crossing a desert. It has to do with you leaving the bondage of the lower mind and making it to the promised land, which is the right hemisphere of the brain, the higher mind, the divine mind, that which is divine consciousness. Okay? We've gone through various cycles of this thing, and I wanted to show you how this book, which is absolutely nothing to do, this story about people coming out of Egypt and going across the desert and across the Red Sea, is psychology. It has nothing to do. It never, ever, ever happened. This didn't happen. This is psychology. This is much more important than reading about people. Why don't you come right up to the front row here, because there's somebody here who wants to meet you. Okay? This story never, ever happened. Okay? But as we understand it, in the context of psychology, we find out how it does happen and how important is it. Let me show you how important this is. When we were in, you go into progression here, and I'm trying not to get too confusing and too complex and with myself and you, but let me just show you how Exodus is. Exodus has several stages. The first stage is to get you to understand how to contend with your emotions. Okay? That's the first part of Exodus. That's the part we're in now. How do you deal with your emotions? How do you deal with the stresses? How do you deal with the fear and the guilt and all of these things that come against you? That's number one. The second part of Exodus is once you've reached a point that you know about meditation and you're able to contend with your emotions, then you're ready to understand cosmic law. You're not ready to understand cosmic law unless you're able to contend with your emotions. You can't do it. So the first part of Exodus where we're at is contending with your mind, contending with your emotions. The second part that we will be going into next week is understanding cosmic law. Now, once you understand that, once you're able to contend with your emotions and understand cosmic law, then you're prepared for the Jesus part, which is cosmic love. Okay? You cannot have cosmic love without cosmic law. You can't have either of them if you can't contend with your emotions. Trying to have cosmic love without cosmic law is trying, for instance, to, say, construct a foundation and live in the foundation. If you construct a house, it isn't reasonable to live in the foundation. That's cosmic law. On the other hand, you cannot construct a house without a foundation. And that's the problem with a lot of religion today. They're trying to live in cosmic love, but they have no knowledge of cosmic law. And you cannot build a house. See, it's like a church. We know what the steeple, we know what it represents, but we also know it's the aspiring towards spirit. Well, you can't put a steeple unless there's a building under it. So you can't put a Jesus unless there's a Moses. And you can't take either of these unless you first have learned how to contend with your emotions. So that's why people who get involved in religion really wind up fighting with each other, because they have no idea. They cannot deal with cosmic love because they've never started the first step of dealing and contending with their emotions, which is the point where we're at now in the study of Exodus. Okay? That's what is so very, very important. And you can't get one in front of the other. You first got to learn meditation so that you can contend with your emotions, because they're always there. The second part of this is once you have and once you understand the value and the need for meditation, then you can go into cosmic law, which we will begin next week. Then the third part is this cosmic love, which is the Jesus part. Okay? And that's, this whole thing is psychology built around the human mind. And so what is it? What is it called? We're trying to get out of the control of the lower mind. We're trying to get out of the control of our emotions, of our fear, of our guilt, of all of these rules and regulations and all of this stuff that has come down upon us, and trying as desperately as we can, we finally come to grips with, I got to get my mind straight. I got to get out of this feeling. I've got to get out of this repression. I got to get out of this guilt. I got to get out of this fear. You've got to exodus. Okay, and that's where we're at. So now, let's go back a little bit further. When we were, before you started coming, before you started getting into meditation, how did you get out of Egypt, which is just allegorical representing the lower mind? What did you do to flee out of there and to start heading in the right direction? The thing that you did is you turned your rod into a serpent. Okay? What that means is the spine, which is the spine, which is the part of you that you live on, that you stand on, your flesh, you no longer depended on it. And when you threw down dependence on yourself, your physical, that rod turned into the serpent, the kundalini, that which moved electrically up your spine. And once you were able to do that, then there was a way out of Egypt. Remember the story? Okay? But there's no way out unless, first of all, you realize you can't depend on yourself anymore. You have to throw down dependence on yourself, which is symbolized by the spine or the rod, and you have to allow the serpent. Now, once you were able to do that, you started moving in the right direction, and the next thing that confronted you was the emotions. You realized that by looking up, continuing in your meditation, you made a pathway across this Red Sea. Your emotions were no longer able, even though they inflict damage, even though they hurt you, they were no longer able to drive you back, because there is a way out. What you're finding is that in the worst type of emotional strain, you know meditation is there. There's always a way across that Red Sea. So that was the second thing. Now what happened again? As we continued the story of Exodus, we came to a place called Marah. And what is that? Bitterness. It was bitter water. And how did we deal with that? What were the instructions? The psychological instructions concerning Marah is that when we throw ourselves, which is the tree, into the water became sweet. And we understand by that water is the second stage of consciousness. So again, it's instruction on meditation. In order for that bitterness that's in our heart to sweeten, we had to take the tree, which is us, and place it in the water. In Greek, there are 5 stages of consciousness: earth, water, air, fire, and the new mind. So the instruction here in this part of Exodus is, remember, when this bitterness starts to well up inside of you, throw yourself immediately into meditation. Throw yourself into that second stage of consciousness, which is water, and the bitterness will turn sweet. Okay, that was another thing that we learned. So what do you see what we're learning here? We're learning all across this pathway how to contend with our emotions. This is the first part of Exodus. What happened next? We realized in the next part of Exodus that at night we must feed off of the flesh so that in the morning we can have bread. And what that meant was that in our meditation, at night in meditation, we will feed off of ourselves. Those are the quails that come at night. We will feed off of ourselves in our meditation so that when the morning comes, we will be enlightened. We will be enlightened and we will have bread. We will understand truth. But we will never understand truth in enlightenment unless first we feed off of ourselves in the darkness of meditation. Do you see the psychology of how this is progressing as we're being taught in Exodus? And what happened last week? Now, you've been given the Newsweek article which says to you that the energy from the spine must touch the pineal gland of the brain, and the melatonin then flows. Okay? And what happened last week? We were told that we had to take the rod, and we know what that is now. The rod is the spine. And what must we do? What did they do last week? You take the rod and you touch the stone. And what happens? Water pours out. And what did we learn? If you take the energy which rises up the spine in your meditation, touches the pineal gland of the brain, the melatonin will flow. So you've gotten to the point now, you turned the rod into a serpent, you got out of Egypt. You looked up, you kept your energy raised, and you crossed the Red Sea of the emotions. You threw yourself into the second stage of consciousness to reduce the bitterness. You feed off the flesh at night when you come into the meditation, and then you're able to eat the bread, the manna that you find at the point of enlightenment. And you take that which is the spine and allow the energy to rise up and touch the pineal gland. And as you see documented in Newsweek magazine, the melatonin flows, the water flows. So you come now, and these are the instructions as to how you deal with your emotions. See, how do you deal mystically, cosmically, spiritually with your emotions? And now you are almost prepared for cosmic law. There's one more thing. And then we'll move on to cosmic law. And what we're going to do too, next week we start cosmic law. The following week after that, we're going to take a complete break. And we're going to enter into the mind of the Bhagwan Rajneesh for a discussion of the difference between cosmic love and cosmic law. I think it's a very fitting time. Just take a break from Exodus and understand it, because his ways are just magnificent in explaining things. And it's necessary to do that. So now you understand why the world is somewhat screwed up with its religions, because they have never, first of all, completed the exodus from the lower mind and learned how to contend with their emotions. Instead, they just eliminated all that. Oh, well, there was one other thing. There was one other thing in our dealing with the emotions before we could get to this point of cosmic law and these things. What did we have to do? We had to stay in the house, inside of ourselves, so there would be Passover. So that we could pass over from the left to the right. And that's a very important part that I missed out. It's all part of this Exodus. But what I want you to understand is that when you read Exodus or you listen to Exodus, you get the tapes of Exodus. Exodus has nothing to do with people crossing the desert. That's stupid. Who cares that they cross the desert? It has to do with you crossing the desert of your mind out of the place of guilt and fear to the promised land, which is at the right side. That's why it's so important. All right, knowing all of that then, you come to the last little lesson about dealing with yourself before you reach the point of cosmic law, which, as I said, is crucial. And remember once again, please, when you think of cosmic law, just think of your house, the house that you live in, wherever you live, and think, cosmic law is the foundation of your house. Think of living in the foundation with no house. You can't. It's not reasonable to do that. You need cosmic love. That's the Jesus part. But then try to think of living in the house with no foundation. That's impossible. And that's why the religions of the world have never been able to find the key, because they've neglected both. They've neglected the foundation and the house. And in order to get to that foundation in the house, Exodus has made it clear, first of all, you've got to learn how to contend with yourself, because all of this other stuff you'll never be able to deal with if you can't contend with yourself. So here's the last part in dealing with Exodus that talks about dealing with yourself, contending with yourself. And we're on page 62, and we start at Exodus 17:8. But let me take a pause here before you open the book. If there was ever a point where the Bible itself was making it obvious that this thing is symbolism, this is it. I mean, if there was ever, if you ever wanted something to be so bizarre that it says to you, obviously you're not going to take this literally. But do you know what? Most, if not all, of the religions of the world, the great institutions, and these people are graduates of universities and seminaries, and they take this stuff literally. And this is the story, that Moses looks at the battle. Joshua is fighting a battle, and Moses sits there like a referee or like the coach. And as long as Moses lifts his hands, Joshua wins. But if he puts his hands down, Joshua loses. Can you imagine this, the bizarreness of this thing? Joshua's winning. Hey, Moses got it. Joshua, he puts his hands down, pick his nose. Oh, hey, he's winning. Oh, scratches his. Oh, he scratches his. He falls down. I mean, just think of a football game, you know. You got your hands up. Yeah, we scored. Whoa, the other guy scored. Hey, whoa, every time he puts his hands. And so Moses gets so tired of putting his hands up, and every time he put, it's like can you imagine it's like a Laurel and Hardy movie? We win, we lose, we win, we lose, we win. Put your hands up. Keep your hands up. So he can't lift his hands anymore. He's got to have somebody hold his hands up for him. So two guys come up and hold his hands up for him. Okay? Folks, they take this literally. Here, can you imagine God, whatever it is, wherever he or she is saying, I can't believe. I didn't ever, could you expect that they could take this literally? But they do. And this is what's it all about? As the song went, Alfie. Let's go to page 62. It is the last segment in learning to deal with your mind. It is the last segment in learning to deal with your emotions and learning to deal with yourself. And once you have this down, then you can go on to cosmic law. Okay? Exodus, page 17, it's page 62. Exodus chapter 17, verse 8. The place of this activity, as you see, then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. Okay? Rephidim means support. And you'll see more about that a little later. You'll understand that. Rephidim means support. Okay? Now, look what happened. Then came Amalek to fight with Israel at Rephidim. Amalek means dweller in the valley. Who is dwelling inside of you in the lower part of your mind is looking for a fight. Right. Amalek represents the emotions. Amalek represents the lower thoughts. And constantly, when you get to the point where you're going around snorting and snotting and looking for a fight, Amalek has got his sword out, and you're saying, go get him, Ammy. And we all do it. There are times that we want Amalek to win. Yeah. But Amalek means dweller in the valley. That is a living aspect. I mean, it's talking about that which comes out of the lower part of your mind. And he's going to fight. Now, the valley is the lower mind. He's not the dweller of the mountain, because the dweller of the mountain is God. He's the dweller in the valley. He's in the lower mind. God is in the higher mind. So Amalek comes, this carnal thought that is constantly fighting against us, constantly causing you trouble, is Amalek, and there's going to be a confrontation. Now, who is going to? Exodus chapter 17, right where you are, verse 9. Joshua, you go out and fight Amalek. The word Joshua means Savior, okay? Joshua, Savior. Now, I want you to see what's going to happen here. Joshua, basically, in the New Testament, is the same as Jesus. All right? This Joshua, this Jesus, will fight the battle in the lower mind. As long as you do something, although you can do nothing. And this is the interesting part. It's very important. The battle of life is not yours. There is nothing you can do. What can you do? What can you do? What can you do when you get into a mood? Nothing. Amalek takes his sword out. There is nothing you can do except snarl and gripe and sulk off and close the door and stomp your feet or grit your teeth or say to yourself, I can't stand this crap anymore. Amalek has got this. There's nothing you can do about it. Somebody's got to beat him up. Somebody's got to wipe him out. In many instances, Amalek never gets wiped out, and it causes real big, serious problems. It can cause problems in families, can cause serious problems in health, can cause lots of people in mental, all kinds of serious things can happen because nobody stops Amalek. But you've got to stand at the top of the hill, and you've got, I'm going to hold this because we need rain, and you've got to hold this rod in your hand. And this rod, take your left hand. Come on, what the heck is a big deal? Feel back there. That's your spine. Feel your spine. Okay, that's the rod. That has got to be elevated to the mountain. In other words, it's got to become this up. Because who is it? It is, okay, it is, look, did you feel your spine? That's your rod, which turns into a serpent. But when you go up to the mountain when this fight is on, look what it says in verse 9. Joshua, choose men, go out and fight with Amalek. I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. Not mine. Say. I will not be. The rod of God is the kundalini. It's the serpent. It'll be in my hand. Okay? And that's very, very important to understand that. Look, let me show you the difficulty that happened. You're in Exodus. Go to page 59. You're only a couple of pages away. In Exodus chapter 59, Exodus chapter 14, page 59. This is the thing. There's a battle going on inside of your head. There's a battle going on inside of your mind. There's a battle going on inside of your body. But it says in Exodus chapter 14, Exodus 14, okay. The Lord shall fight for you. Everybody repeat it after me. And you shall hold your peace. Shut up your face, close your Bible, sit on your rump, kick your shoes off, and wait. There is nothing you can do. Because if you try to fight with Amalek, he's going to kick the tar out of you. Amalek never loses to you. Never loses to you. So who's going to have to fight? Joshua? Jesus? That's fine. Jesus is going to have to fight. You have no, well, what are you going to do? Remember something. If you intend to win this battle, if you don't stay up on the mountain and keep your hands lifted, Amalek will beat Jesus to a pulp. Every time you let down your hands, Amalek will clobber Jesus. Hey, pow! Just like Mike Tyson. Jesus is standing there, come on, come on. I'm Jesus, I'm the Lord, I'm the Savior. Come on. And old Mike, pow! Why? Why did Jesus hit the deck? Why is Jesus down for the count? Because you dropped your hands. Huh? Which means Jesus is worthless unless you are there at the mountaintop. You can't do anything. What do we say? You can't have the church if there's no foundation. You can't have a foundation with no church. You've got to have it together. This is the important part. You play. This is your life. This is your battle. You can't fight it. Now you understand what this thing of Jesus fighting your battle is. But unless you're on the mountain with your hands up in the air, he goes down. He loses. Amalek wins. You want to call Amalek the devil, Satan? It's all the same stuff. It's just different allegories. It's all stories. Psychology. This stuff was not written by stupid people writing Bibles. That's silly. This stuff was written by cosmic psychologists.
About the Antichrist?
Yeah, the Antichrist, whatever you want to call it. It's fine. But it's all the same thing. Who is the Antichrist? The Christ that we know says, practice the single eye. Take no thought. Look within yourself. And the church says, don't do that. You'll open your mind to devils. Who's the Antichrist? Okay. Now, you're on Exodus chapter 17, and look at verse 9. Here you stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in your hand. And remember, that rod of God is when that movement has gone up the spine and impacted the pineal gland. And please, if you want to understand that, you go right back to the back there. You pick up that New York Times article from 1992, and you look at that statement, and there's a picture in there from Dr. Louis, his name is, showing the energy rising up the back. Okay, what is it again so that you understand? It is not only what they call kundalini in the Bible, kundalini in the works of the Hindus, where the energy moves up the spine to the pineal gland. It is also what is known as the book of life in the Bible. Go to page 1005. Page 1005. Revelation chapter 5 and verse 1. Okay? And I saw in the right hand, that's the right hemisphere of the brain, of him that sat on the throne, that's the higher consciousness, a book, that's the book of life, written within That's within you. And on the back side, you remember you felt your spine? Sealed with 7 seals. That's the 7 chakras or the 7 resistors, the 7 nerve centers. And if you look at that New York Times article and that picture with Dr. Louis Drew, you'll see that he says the energy rises up through nerve centers in the spine and then impacts the pineal gland and the melatonin flows. Okay? All right, so that's what you have to do. Now, what about this thing of the rod? Let's retrace our steps for a minute. When Moses allegorically was talking to God and God says, go tell Pharaoh, he says, oh, you go tell Pharaoh. I can't. What the heck am I? I can't walk in there. I don't have any power. And what are you looking for power of? You got just think of your personal problems. Forget about pharaohs and presidents. What personal problems do you have? You don't have any power to overcome them, but you do. And this is what it's all about. Go to page 49 and look at Exodus chapter 42. And on page 49, Exodus chapter 4, page 49, Exodus chapter 4, this is what God says to Moses. Verse 2, God says to Moses, what do you have in your hand? And Moses says, a rod. And that symbolizes your spine. In other words, you have control over yourself. It's in your hand. And God says, throw it on the ground. In other words, don't hang on to it. Don't hang on to yourself. Don't hang on to your ideas. Don't hang on to your religion. Don't hang on to your patriotism. Don't hang on for your traditions. Don't hang on to all your family values and all of this thing that was shoved down your throat. Cast it on the ground, and it was thrown on the ground. It became a serpent. In other words, once you are no longer dependent on yourself and the things that were put into your brain by your family and your friends and your teachers and all of this stuff, then that female power of God can rise within you. And the only way you can do that is within meditation. I did a wedding yesterday. Josie Steenberg's son got married. And before I did the wedding, I told people, what you're going to hear is things you haven't heard before. And I just telling you, I said, I spoke to the people getting married. They understand that, or else I wouldn't be here. But I said, I don't do weddings like people normally do because I'm against traditional values, because traditional values are evil. I'm against the traditional family. I do not do a wedding in which I ask the woman to promise to obey any man. I do not do a wedding in which I ask the wife to be subjected to any man. I won't do that because it's evil, disgusting, horrible. It's of hell. So, that was a good way to start off the day. And so we went in, and I said this, as I did the wedding, and the words, well, this is a partnership. You're going to have a baby? You decide. Who's the smart one in your family? The dopey one should stay home and take care of the baby. It may be the man. Then the woman can go out and be the lawyer or whatever and have the career. Has nothing to do with who's a man and who's a woman. But you know what was good? A lot of people, I was in the men's room. And in the men's room, you do what men's rooms, you do in men's rooms. And there was a guy standing there, and he had just finished. He was washing his hands, and he was going out the door. He said to me, by the way, that was a very nice service. He said, it wasn't like the other ones I've been to. He said, it made sense. and he went out the door. So I tell you. So I thought that was pretty neat. He says it wasn't like the other ones. It made sense. That was pretty good. Okay, so when God says, take that rod, that which you depend on, that which is yourself, that which you have to control, throw it on the ground, and it becomes the serpent, okay? Now, in Exodus chapter 17, you're back on page 62 where you are, and Exodus chapter 17, look at verse 10. So Joshua did as Moses, and he fought with Amalek, and Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Now, watch this one, and this should shake your socks. I don't know how many of you have socks on, but this is pretty neat. Whatever. Okay? Moses, this is you, goes up to the top of the hill. You got to stay in the mountain. In other words, you got to stay in meditation. You got to stay in higher consciousness, or else Jesus or Joshua cannot fight this battle for you. That's the rule. And who does go up to the top of the mountain with Moses? Aaron, which means illuminator. Light. And who's the other one? Hur, which means hold. The whole, the illuminator, the light, the single eye, the pineal gland. Do you understand it? that, do you ever see the people, like, remember the lady that came into you and said, from that center of her, between her eyebrows, this light? The hole is the single eye, the pineal gland, located in the center between your eyebrows, the illuminator. So when you go to the mountaintop, the energy is focused at the pineal or at the center. Okay. Now, in Exodus 17:11, and it came to pass, when Moses held up his hands, Israel prevailed. When he let him down, Amalek prevailed. You remember what Paul said in Hebrews 6? Get away from the doctrines of Christ and go on to perfection. Look, raising your hands means nothing except that your hands are raised. It doesn't mean raising your hand. Shoot the bull doesn't mean you shoot a bull. Shut your mouth off doesn't mean you shut your mouth off. Spill the beans has nothing to do with beans. Right on the nose has nothing to do with the nose. Off the wall has nothing to do with the wall. Lifting hands has nothing to do with lifting hands. It's a symbol for leaving your energy rise. As long as your energy is rising, you are lifting your hands. When people go in churches, and I know it's nice, and I know it feels good, and I know it looks good, and everybody lifts their hand, but it's ridiculous. It doesn't mean anything. It's like getting baptized without going into the second stage of consciousness. You got your head wet. Now you got your hands up in the air. Who is in the ceiling that cares if your hands are in the air? But who is in your mind that cares if your energy is in the air? When you lift your energy into the air, you have gone to the third stage of consciousness. Earth, water, air. And when your energy reaches the air, you rise to meet Jesus in the air, and Amalek, which is torturing you in the valley, will lose. Okay. If you keep your energy raised in that meditation, in Matthew 14, verse 25, we're not going to go there right now, Jesus is walking on the water. Look, earth, that's the first stage. Water, second stage. Air, third stage. Fire, fourth stage. New mind. That's the progression of this thing, okay? Now, we have raised our hands up into the air, means you raise your energy to the third stage. The Apostle Paul said he was translated into the third heaven. 1 Kings 6:8 says the energy rises up with winding stairs up to the right side and then out to the third. That's air. Jesus was walking on the water. That's the second stage. He says to Peter, come on. He says to you, come on, walk on the water. Lift yourself in meditation. Om Namyo Renge Kyo. Lift yourself into the second stage of meditation. Raise yourself up to the second stage. Come on, come on, come on, Peter. Come on, Aline, walk. Walk on the water. Come on out, walk on the water. Lorraine, walk on the water. And everybody gets out to walk on the water. And Peter gets out to walk on the water, which means you've reached the second stage of consciousness. But then, within a very short space of time, you find yourself looking down at all of the crap. And what happens? Right down the toilet, you sink. Right down you go, you sink. And so, as long as the energy is up, you win. When the energy is down, you lose. When you're on the water, you win. When you look down, you sink. It's up to you. Is that great? It's up to you. It has nothing to do with church. There is no church on the face of the earth that can save you. There is no Jesus that can save you unless you do what he says to do. That's why Jesus, why the hell do you call me Lord and not do the things I tell you to do? What's this Lord stuff? Jesus is Lord. Have you ever meditated? We don't do that. Our church, our pastor doesn't allow that. Let me show you something. Go to page 5. Genesis chapter 6. Page 5. Genesis chapter 6. This is Noah's Ark. I want to just show you something. It's interesting. You there? All right, verse 16. A window, this is the ark, you shall make to the ark, and in a cubit. You know what a cubit is? 18 inches. Comes out to 9. Okay? That's not the important part. But look what it says. And in a cubit shall you finish it above. The window's got to be in the ceiling. You're not going to look out. You're going to look at all that crap that's coming against you. You're going to bail out. You're going to sink. in meditation, you look up. So, yeah, when you come out of meditation, you're going to look at it. You're going to worry about it. You're going to scream about it. You're going to kick things about it. But the point is you stay in meditation, even if you don't think you're getting a blasted thing out of it, even if the music's too loud or the music's too low or you're bored or you're not bored, it doesn't make any difference. The pineal gland opens, the melatonin flows, and Jesus knocks the hell out of Amalek. How do you like that? And all you had to do was sit on the mountain and wait. It's a good deal. I didn't get anything out of this. I don't like to go down here. God, the music's too loud. Hey, whatever happened to that problem you had? Oh, the guy decided not to do anything. The guy decided not to do anything. There's no more problem. So Moses' hands. Now, there's a time when you get tired of all this. I can't go down there. Jesus, it looks like I heard it's going to rain next week. I'm not taking any chances. My air conditioner's broken in my car. What's the couch going to do without me? The dog. I can't go down there. And I'm tired. I got to get up tomorrow morning. But this scripture makes it clear, my friends, you don't have any choice. You don't have any choice. And you can take it to the bank. If you do, you'll win. If you don't, you'll lose. Whatever it is. Whatever it is. You lose the battle. And who is going to beat you? The dweller in the valley.
And you never get rid of him.
We didn't get to that point yet, but that's true. Now, Exodus 17:12, in page 62. All right, with me? Exodus 17:12. And Moses' hands were heavy. And what happened? Listen to me. Moses' hands were heavy. He couldn't continue. They put a stone under him. Huh? He touched the stone on the mountain. Oh, I can't. But he touched the stone on the mountain. That's the stone that Jesus said in Matthew 21:42. It's the pineal stone. And Jesus said the stone that the builders rejected, religion rejects it, has turned out to be the cornerstone and the most important of all. So though our human effort may fail us in trying to overcome, when we touch the stone, there's a movement of energy. Now, Raphadim, where all this happens, means support. The pineal is the place of support. It's the place where we are lifted so that we overcome all of this negative crap. And look what it says in verse 12 of Exodus chapter 17. Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, one on one side, one on the other side, and the hands were steady until the going down of the sun. Aaron the illuminator, the light, Hur the whole, that which is the pineal, that center place between the eyebrows where that energy comes and floods through the brain and through the mind and opens up and the melatonin flows and all of these wonders happen. This is given to you, and it's even though you can't, even though you don't want to, even though it's too busy, even though you're too tired, even though you get up, and all this crap. If you will just sit there and then allow that to lift your hands, allow that to lift your energy, it'll do it for you. And it'll keep it there. As the sun stays within you, it will keep it there until the sun goes, until there is no longer a need for the sun, and until you can go to sleep. When the sun goes down, you can go to sleep. But as long as the sun, which is the light of the world, which is the Jesus, which is the Christ within you, is shining, Amalek is losing, and your hands will be stayed. Your energy will be held up by the flowing of this holy light, the flowing of this sacred pine cone, the flowing of this magic elixir which God has placed in you. And all He's ever asked you to do is sit up there on the top and wait. Sit up there on the top and just focus in the center, and I'll fight the battle for you. And you'll win every time. You'll win. In Exodus 17:13, and Joshua won the battle, and it says, discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And the sword in Ephesians 16, the sword is the Spirit, which is the Word. See, the Word of God is not a book. That's stupid. We say, oh, you got to get into the Word. Which book? There's 10,000 versions of this thing. Some guy doesn't like what that, they make a different one. I mean, that's ridiculous. Anything that can be changed by a human being cannot be the Word of God. And books can be changed. But one thing cannot be changed. The magic within you, the power within you. When you sit on the mountaintop, nobody can touch it. That's the Spirit. And in verse 14, to answer the question that Carol raised a moment ago. Look what it says. And the Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. For I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And in verse 16 he said, because the Lord has sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. It'll never end. No matter when you are born or where you were born, there'll be an Amalek ready to raise hell with you. And now, in this last study, okay, the struggle we learned from all of the other things that we learned in Exodus so far. We've learned that we cannot depend on ourselves, but when we throw dependence of ourselves down, it becomes the serpent of Kundalini. We've learned that we've got to stay within ourselves until this trouble passes over. We've learned that we've got to keep our eyes upward so that the Red Sea parts and we overcome the emotions. We learned that in our bitterness, we've got to cast ourselves into that second stage of consciousness till we know the truth. We learned that we got to allow the energy from the spine to touch the rod, to touch the stone and the water, and the melatonin will flow. And now we understand that when the battle is raging from our lower mind within us, we have to sit in meditation and raise ourselves as high and keep our energy up there until this battle is won. And that the Jesus will come, the Joshua will come, and that which is the adversary who comes against you in your personal situation will lose. But God, please understand, I don't care how much you pray, I don't care how many Bibles or books you read, I don't care whether you're new age, old age, underage, whatever age you are. If you don't sit in that mountaintop and keep your energy up, you're going to lose. And every time you let down your energy, Amalek's going to beat the hell out of you. But all you know is one thing. All I got to do to get after that scoundrel is lift my hands, raise my energy upward, and allow the illuminator, Aaron, and that hole which is her, that center, to light up and allow that energy to flow. And we will overcome. And once now that you have understood these things about meditation and about yourself and about the need for meditation and about the need for confronting the emotions and the spirit within you with meditation, once you have learned this, you have made a big step across the desert of Exodus towards the promised land, and you are now ready to experience cosmic law. And that's where we go from here. Okay? Okay. Thank you. And thank you.